Welcome to the Genetic Engineering lecture for plants, humans, and the environment. Before we talk about genetic engineering, we need to review previous agricultural technologies that were developed to improve plant varieties. Artificial selection was the process adopted by early farmers and persisted for thousands of years. Within the last century, intensive crossbreeding technologies were developed through scientific agricultural research. Genetic engineering is a relatively new technology. All of these are attempts to develop an agricultural crop with more desirable traits. Let's look at each of these in a little more detail. Artificial selection is a non-invasive technique. Seeds are selected from a plant that has desirable traits and then planted. There is no direct manipulation of the seed, plant, or reproduction process. Over time, the traits of the crop will change depending on which seeds are selected to be planted. Crossbreeding is a manipulation of the reproductive process. Plant varieties that may only be distantly related are bred by hand pollination. The breeding may go through several cycles until the desired cross variety is developed. Crossbreeding is a biological form of reproduction, but it's done with varieties that wouldn't be likely to breed in that sequence in the wild. It had to be done by people. The result is a plant with what's called hybrid vigor. The plant will be very productive with a high yield, but the seeds of the plant are sterile. These seeds can't be planted to grow more of that highly productive variety. It's similar to when a horse and a donkey breed to produce a mule. Mules are very strong, durable animals with hybrid vigor, but they are sterile. You couldn't make more mules by breeding mules. Crossbreeding to produce high-yield varieties was successful and significantly increased production of staple crops. It was promoted as the technology that would end world hunger. Norman Borlaug was the pioneer and leading scientist developing high-yield varieties, and he even won the Nobel Prize for his contribution to increasing world food production. Given these hopes, high-yield variety crops were seen as providing a green revolution to feed the world. All the technologies that were associated with growing high-yield variety crops on a farm came to be known as the Green Revolution technologies. These crossbred high-yield variety seeds can only be grown in conjunction with all those technologies that are part of the industrial agricultural model, particularly the chemical pesticides and fertilizers. So, using a high-yield variety seed meant that a farmer also had to buy into an entire package that included the chemicals. The seed companies also happen to be chemical companies, and many are primarily chemical companies that also produce seeds. Because this technology was advertised as a cure for world hunger, the package was exported to less developed countries as food aid. However, because the technologies are expensive for farmers and the food is expensive for consumers, the Green Revolution did not end world hunger. There is obviously still hunger in the world. Farmers and consumers couldn't afford it. But it did succeed in positioning these biotechnology companies to be in control of world food markets, as the industrial agricultural model displaced small-scale farmers and provided an export commodity for those countries. The biotechnology industry has now moved on to invest in genetically engineering new crop varieties. Genetically engineered crops have genes that were taken from another organism and added to their genetic material. This is not done by sexual reproduction, which is how crossbreeding and artificial selection achieved new crop varieties. In fact, the genetic material implanted into the plant DNA doesn't even need to come from a plant. It could be from a bacteria or even an animal. Instead, the genetic engineering is a direct transfer of genetic material by people. The claim has been made that the process is like playing God. It is an entirely new technology that has never been done before and could never happen naturally without people doing it. Like skyscrapers. Skyscrapers would never exist if people didn't build them. In this case, people have essentially created new life forms. There are two main claims made for how genetically engineered crops can benefit farmers. First, crops are genetically engineered to have pest resistance, meaning that the plant is inherently resistant to pests like insects. It is resistant because genetic material has been implanted into the plant's DNA, making the plant able to produce insecticide in every one of its cells. Rather than spraying an insecticide on the outside of the plant, the insecticide is within the plant, including the roots, leaves, fruits, and all other parts. With the chemical inside the plant, the farmer does not need to apply chemical insecticides. Second, crops are genetically engineered to have herbicide resistance, meaning that they are able to survive when a harsh chemical herbicide is sprayed on them. Typically, conventional farmers will till a field, let the weeds grow up, then spray several rounds and types of herbicides on the soil to kill the weeds. The soil is tilled again and seed planted for the crop to grow. As the crop grows, though, so do more weeds. Another round of herbicides must be applied, being careful not to damage the crop while trying to kill the weeds. With herbicide-resistant crops, on the other hand, the soil doesn't need tilling, and the seed can simply be planted to grow up among all the weeds. Then a very strong herbicide can be sprayed to kill the weeds, but it won't kill the crop that has a genetic herbicide resistance. This can reduce the need to spray cocktails of herbicide and also reduce the damage done by tilling to the soil. The other major claim in favor of genetically engineered crops is that they can significantly reduce global malnutrition. The assumption is that it is easier and cheaper to add a nutrient to a crop that is already being consumed rather than to provide additional food or other crops that can provide the nutrient. Biotechnology's claim to target global malnutrition with genetically engineered food has been coined the second green revolution. However, critics claim that it is a repeat of the first green revolution in the sense that it doesn't address the root causes of malnutrition, which are poverty and inequitable distribution of food. It is another technology that controls food sources and is too expensive for those who need it. Other problems have been raised about genetically engineered crops. These plants are growing in an ecological context, so conditions will change in the environment. Most importantly, pests are becoming resistant to the insecticides in the genetically engineered plants, and weeds are becoming resistant to the herbicides, acquiring the ability to survive heavy sprayings just like the GE crops can. Super weeds will require ever harsher chemicals to kill them, and pests will require that ever-changing insecticides become a part of crop DNA. This is a cycle that mainly benefits the biotechnology companies developing the technologies, but is a cost to farmers, the environment, and consumers. Another major issue is the inability to contain this newly formed DNA. Genetically engineered plants are not sterile. They can reproduce by perfectly normal means, and the offspring will also contain the genetically engineered DNA. When a seed or pollen moves off the field that it was planted on, it is no longer able to be controlled. Seeds can be dispersed to fields with crops that should not be genetically engineered, for example, organic farms, or into the wild. Genetic pollution occurs when these transgenic varieties breed with non-genetically engineered populations, forever adding the genetically engineered DNA to the contaminated population. Once that happens, there is no way to remove that genetic material. This is not only a concern for current food consumption, but also for future food security. When wild populations are contaminated with genetically engineered DNA, and we later find a problem with that DNA, we will have no seed stock available to develop new varieties without the engineered DNA if all have been contaminated. For example, the recent rise in food allergies shows correlation with the increased use of genetically engineered crops. It's a problem for food security in a legal sense as well. The biotechnology companies are not held liable for genetic pollution. However, they do press charges when they find their genetic material growing on a farm that didn't pay for the seeds. Genetically engineered seeds can be patented, which means that the company has a legal right to that information in the seed. Farmers have been sued by these multinational, multi-billion-dollar companies when their farm fields were contaminated and found growing genetically engineered crops, even if the farmer doesn't want those crops to be growing there. Because it is inevitable that genetic pollution will happen, it is likely that the biotechnology companies could hold legal right to the vast majority of food produced around the world. A monopoly like that on food is unprecedented. Certain policies, particularly in the US, will let this scenario play out. The biotechnology companies happen to have significant influence in US politics, as can be seen by the sampling of individuals who hold office in the federal government and also hold positions at Monsanto, which is the biotechnology company leading the patent enforcement, as you can see in the graphic. The inconsistency is that the biotechnology companies claim that genetically engineered crops are unique when they want a patent for the crops, but at the same time, they also claim that these crops are not different from other crops when consumers want them to be labeled as genetically engineered crops. That concludes the genetic engineering lecture.